I'm going to read a passage from Matthew 23. I'm going to read from verse 23 to verse 27. Notice that Jesus is dealing with hypocrisy. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done, without leaving the others undone. Blind guides, who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like the whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanliness. So notice that the context in this passage is hypocrisy. Jesus is not praising the Pharisees, he's condemning them for their utter and complete hypocrisy. Secondly, notice that it states very clearly in Matthew 23:23 that the tithe is a part of the law. This is very important, because if you can prove that tithing is a part of the law, then if the law has become obsolete, then so too has the tithing command for today. Thirdly, notice what they were tithing. They weren't tithing money, like modern churches and pastors insist on today. They were tithing spices, mint, anise, and cumin. So the first thing you could do, whenever this verse is raised, is ask, who is Jesus speaking to? The answer, well, he's speaking to the scribes and Pharisees. So you say, oh, are you a scribe and a Pharisee, Mr. Modern Day Tither? And hopefully they're going to say, no, I'm not a modern day scribe and Pharisee. So you could then say, well, this doesn't apply to you then, does it? If you're not a scribe and a Pharisee, you're not under the tithing laws. You don't have to tithe 3 spices of mint, anise, and cumin. Oh, and by the way, what was tithed here? Ask that question. And hopefully they will respond, spices, not money. The second thing to point out is that when you look at 3 general passages on tithing, Numbers 18, Malachi 3, and Matthew 23:23, notice that in all of these passages, what was tithed was food. The tithe was of the food of the ground. Okay, so look at Numbers 18, verses 19 to about verse 30, and you find out it was food. Deuteronomy 14:22 to 29 confirms this. Now, this passage, Numbers 18, is approximately 1700 BC. Now, Malachi chapter 3, verse 10 also mentions the tithe, and it also mentions that the tithe was food. Now, that's approximately 500 BC. And here in Matthew 23:23, we're round about AD 30, AD 29, give or take a year or two. So here's an interesting fact. Over a period of nearly 2,000 years, they were tithing food. They were tithing food in Numbers 18 and Deuteronomy 14. They were tithing food in Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, and they were tithing food in Matthew 23:23. So as they were tithing food for 2,000 years, and not one verse of scripture says that they were tithing money, ask your modern day tithing pastor to show you a verse which states that God changed the tithe from food to money. Because from these passages that I've shown you, we have a consistent record that they did not tithe money, they only tithe food. Now again, Matthew 23:23 states that tithing is a part of the law. Let me read the verse to you again. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe, so here's the context, tithe, of what? Mint and anise and cumin, spices, not money, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law. So Jesus links the tithe with the law, and he states that tithing is a part of the law. Now, of course, when the law became obsolete, and we read of that in Hebrews 8:13, then tithing would have become obsolete as well. And the reason why the law became obsolete was that it could not make anybody or anything perfect. Hebrews 7:18 and 19. That's why Christ had to come and die. Christ came and died, and by doing so, he replaced the law. Now, tithing symbolizes the fall of man and his redemption, because remember, there was the tree in the midst of the garden in Genesis chapter 2. Adam was told not to eat of it. Adam and Eve were told not to eat of it, and yet they did. So they broke the law. And because of that, a curse was placed upon them at Genesis 3:17. Adam had to till the ground, and in his sweat he would produce food through his own efforts. But the thing about this is that no matter how hard we work as human beings, we can't actually make food. It's God who provides the food, not us. We have to work with God. We have to till the ground. We have to pluck the fruit off the tree. But it's God who gives the increase. Now, the tithe is fulfilled in Jesus Christ. He is the fulfillment of the tithe, being the bread from heaven. John 6:58. So when Christ became the curse for us, Galatians 3:17, he fulfilled the tithing law. Now, one final point. Was Jesus saying at Matthew 5:17 and 18 that the law would last forever, even until the end of the age? Okay, until there's a new creation, a new heavens and a new earth. Is that what Jesus is saying at Matthew 5:17 and 18, which I will now read? Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law, till all is fulfilled. Now, till heaven and earth pass away is hyperbole. Although this will happen eventually when the heavens and the earth are created, Jesus is using hyperbole here. The key word in this passage is fulfilled. Till all is fulfilled. Now, when was all fulfilled? When did Christ fulfill God's purposes? That happened on the cross, when Christ said, "It is finished," and in the Greek it is recorded as a present tense. Finished is telos, and it's a present tense. It's not a future tense. He wasn't saying, oh, this will be finished eventually, I believe Seventh-day Adventists believe that Jesus had an investigative judgment in the year 1844. They claim that he did a sort of salvation work in heaven in the year 1844. So salvation for them wasn't properly secured on the cross. Well, if that's the case, then Jesus would not have said, "It is finished," at John 19:30. He would have said, "It will be finished." He would have used a present tense in the Greek translation. But we don't find that. So the ridiculous Seventh-day Adventist claims are mistaken. There is no investigative judgment. And likewise, people who promote tithing today are also mistaken. Because when Christ said, "It is finished," the new covenant was then instituted at his death, because it's by the death of Christ and by his resurrection that the new covenant comes into being. That's Hebrews chapter 9, verses 16 and 17. Now, that made the law obsolete. And as I have already stated, the law was made obsolete by Christ bringing in the new covenant, Hebrews 8:13, and the old covenant was annulled by Christ's death, burial and resurrection, Hebrews 7:18. Now, a final point is this. Tithing is essentially a form of taxation. Tithing had three aspects to it. There was the Levitical tithe, which supported the government of the country. The Levites had no inheritance in the land, Numbers 18, 19 and 20. And because they had no inheritance in the land, they therefore worked as the administrators. And the first tithe, the Levitical tithe, was payment for that, payment for those services in running the government of the country. The second tithe was the festival tithe. This was connected to the religious duties which the people had to perform. So they themselves would keep and store the festival tithe in their own houses for that particular function, which was the religious duties. And the third tithe was the poor tithe. It was a kind of social security system. So tithing essentially was a form of taxation. Now here's the point which I wish to stress about the tithe and the law. The Levitical law of which tithing was a part tried to clean people up from the outside inwards. So it started with many duties that we had to perform, outward duties, outward signs. And it believed that, or at least people believed, that if they did these outward duties like tithing and keeping these festivals and keeping all the various Sabbaths, that they could make themselves clean on the inside by their outward observance to the law. Now in the New Covenant, God deals with our hearts first of all, Jeremiah 31:33. So he cleanses us, you see, in the New Covenant from the inside out, not by our own efforts, but by Christ's work. And cleansing us from the inside out, hopefully, the result of that, which is called sanctification in the Christian walk, means that our outward walk is also purified. We begin to live a holy life for Christ because we love Christ. And the inward work will transform us so that we begin to do an outward work for God as our sanctification as we go through our Christian life. Now here's the finishing thought I'd like to leave with you. Tithing is an anachronism. It's simply a tax law. It's a means of taxation. And you can't make your heart pure. You can't clean up your Christian life, as many people are trying to do today, by keeping a form of ancient taxation. That's stupid. God cleanses our hearts in the New Covenant from the inside. Jeremiah, as I have said, 31:31. Christ has done that. So put your faith and your trust in what Christ has done, and stop trying to clean up your life from the outside in by observance to an ancient form of government taxation. Thank you.